Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. I guess we could call this tonight Police Off the Cuff Late Night. But a lot of you guys are around at 10 o'clock at night, wherever you're coming from, different time zones. Carolyn Grayston says the winds in Scotland are pounding the community 80, 90 miles an hour. I hope she can stay safe there. It's those are some high winds, and wherever you guys are, I hope you're staying warm. There's been an awful cold spell. I know in the Northeast, I'm here down in Florida. It's not exactly warm, but you don't want to hear about it. It's warmer than the Northeast, that's for sure. So, Melissa, still, I'm in British Columbia, Canada. It's probably freezing there too. Cold. Anyway, some goings on now in the Kohberger case, mostly procedural, but we're all anxiously awaiting decisions of what's going on in that case. And we've all, of course, been promised that the case is going to go this summer, 2024. That this horrific case is going to finally go to trial, that the defendant, Bryan Kohberger, who you see up on the screen there, that's an earlier photo of him, is finally going to face the music for the murders of the 4 Idaho students that we've almost come to know too well, and of course want justice for them. Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogen, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. It's almost they become like our little brothers and sisters here. And so many twists and turns in this case. We remember, of course, their family, Steve and Christy Gonsalves, which have become almost the face of this case, the parents, the grieving parents that we see on all media, TV stations, and they become the face of the Idaho students, as well as this beautiful family here, the family of Ethan Chapin. And of course, he was a triplet, or he is a triplet, and with his mom and dad there and his brother and sister. Just think of the grief that they've gone through for this. And will there ever, I don't know if you can ever use the word closure in the loss of a child. And there's Ethan Chapin's mom. And the twists and turns this case has taken, we all railed against the knocking down. Well, I can't say we all, I did. We railed against the knocking down of 1122 King Road. Of course, the crime scene in this horrific case. And I felt that right from the very beginning that it should have been kept whole until after the trial, in case jurors wanted to go in and get to see and feel and smell and feel the location of where this horrific crime took place. But that wasn't to be. The house was knocked down, as you can see in these photos here. How eerie does it look with that big earth mover there, that big backhoe, or whatever that machine is called, and the house gone. It just doesn't seem okay. It just doesn't seem right. There's the house. Sort of a weird, when we look at that house, it's a weird looking house, right? Sort of built in a way that defies architecture in lots of ways, defies the architects. But when it's not there, it's even more bizarre. 1122 King Road, which is the address of this location. So guys, hang on to your seats. Get ready to enter true crime, real crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone. There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch, Michael Weiser.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger.
Well, a judge has ordered prosecutors to turn over some DNA records to attorneys representing Bryan Kohberger, the man accused of the murders of the 4 University of Idaho students. Kohberger, who's 29 years old, is charged with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of burglary in the deaths of Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. And of course, we know the 4 were found stabbed to death in an off-campus rental home near the university site in Moscow on November 13th, 2022. And that address would be 1122 King Road. The judge entered a not guilty plea on Kohberger's behalf last year. He faces the death penalty if convicted. A trial date has not yet been set, but Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson has requested that it be scheduled for the summer. Kohberger, as we know, was a graduate student studying criminology at Washington State University in nearby Pullman at the time of the slayings. He was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania after investigators pieced together DNA evidence, cell phone data, and surveillance video that they say linked him to the crime. This is according to Newsweek. Investigators said traces of DNA, of course, as we all know, found on a knife sheath inside the home where the 4 students were killed were linked to Kohberger. For months, Kohberger's attorneys have sought records relating to investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG, that prosecutors have said was used to identify Kohberger as a suspect in the case. Genetic genealogy involves entering a DNA profile into a public database to find relatives, and has in recent years emerged as a powerful tool for identifying suspects who leave DNA behind at a crime scene. This past Thursday, Judge John Judge of Idaho's 2nd Judicial District ordered prosecutors to turn over some of the investigative genetic genealogy records to Kohberger's attorneys. The court has now completed its review of the information provided by the state and orders the state to discover to the defense a portion of the IgG information. The specific material to be provided is set forth in a sealed order to protect the privacy of the IgG information, including individuals on the family tree. Experts have previously told Newsweek that Kohberger's attorneys will be working to discredit the DNA evidence that prosecutors are relying on in the case. The defense is doing what they can to discredit the DNA evidence that puts Kohberger at the scene of the crime, casting doubt on the methodology used to collect the DNA as well as the reliability of the DNA evidence is the best manner they have to do this. The defense expert will likely testify to the jury regarding the potential of less reliable results when tracing genealogy through DNA as opposed to direct DNA sampling. The prosecution, however, will obtain a competing expert to debunk the defense expert's opinion. A gag order imposed in the case bars the prosecution, defense attorneys, and law enforcement officials from discussing it. So, guys, that's where this was what was going on in the last week of this case. Investigative genetic genealogy. It's sort of a mouthful and a really important science, a breakthrough in the testing of genetic genealogy and building family trees that the police, prosecutors, investigators have been able to use this technology to build family trees and thus come up with the DNA that previously they were unable to come up with. And this was the case with the DNA found on the knife sheath. And as you recall, going back in this case, they recovered DNA from the garbage pails in Bryan Kohberger's family's house in Pennsylvania. And they first identified the DNA belonging to his father. And then that DNA was directly connected to him. So this has not been an immediate discovery. It was something that took a while, and they were able to identify this DNA as belonging to Kohberger's through investigative genetic genealogy. And as you recall, also, one of the big problems was that the FBI were the ones who did these tests. And we all know, trying to get the FBI to turn things over, we watch Congress. It's not so easy to do. So Judge John Judge did actually get them to turn this evidence over eventually.
For months has been asking the prosecution to turn over DNA records, the materials that were held by the FBI and this private lab, Othram, that apparently performed the DNA tests in the case. Prosecution fought back on this, saying they didn't have access to the records because they were in the custody of the FBI. They said they never saw them. And they even requested a protective order. The judge in this case, Judge John Judge, that's his name, reviewed the materials, and he has ordered the prosecution that they have to turn over to the defense some DNA records about investigative genetic genealogy used in the case. Again, namely how the material was entered into a public genealogy database. The court said the court has now completed its review of the information provided by the state and orders the state to discover to the defense a portion of the IgG information. With all of that, what do you think?
It may be much ado about nothing. Let me try and tell you why. What you called familial DNA searching is a means to an end. In other words, it's an investigation. And so it's a tool. And if you find some DNA at a crime scene and you run it through the database and it doesn't hit on an individual, you next expand the search criteria, so to speak. Is it close to anybody's? Okay, it's close to dad. Well, we know dad wasn't there. Who's dad related to? Son. And then, as you put it, they got the confirmatory DNA. So this is a complaint about how did you get me, not am I the guy. If I'm correct on that, unless there are other DNA records that raise problems. The issues are not what will the jury hear, because juries don't normally hear about your dad's DNA or your cousin's in the database or whatever. The issue is, can I, the defendant, challenge that in some way? You violated my privacy or my family's privacy or the privacy of other people, or you violated some state law because one or two states ban familial searching. I don't believe that to be the case in this state. So the problem Bryan will face, assuming I'm correct, is that his privacy rights are not really violated when you're looking in a database and finding his father's DNA. So I'm not sure where they're going to go with this.
I think what this attorney, this law professor is trying to say also is that the defense is looking, of course, to create doubt. And one of the ways they always attack or to create doubt is to attack evidence, and specifically the collection of evidence. How was this DNA collected? Who collected it? What were the procedures? Did they follow the procedures? Was any of the evidence contaminated? Whose rights did you violate in collecting this evidence? These are all questions that a fair game for the defense to want to ask in order to create doubt. Because as we know, and I say it, and I maybe overuse this expression ad nauseum, is that it's the job of the prosecution to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And therefore, it is the defense's job to poke holes in the prosecution's case and create doubt.
The only other thing I can think of is sort of a garbage in, garbage out argument that they got the wrong information in this intergenerational search, that somehow polluted everything else. But to me, it doesn't answer, once you arrest him and you take that cheek swab and you match it to the sheath, how we got there is not, to me, a significant trial issue.
By the way, talking about complicated legal issues in the Kohberger criminal case, I got to say, even in personal injury cases like lawsuits, which you would think are relatively straightforward, they can be really complicated. And that's aside from the fact that it's also incredibly scary if you get hurt. Knowing what to do next, where to turn, it's not so simple. Well, our partner.
So what he was talking about, the professor, was that why is this so important? How they got there? Isn't it more important what the evidence actually is? That if it's Kohberger's DNA, why is it so important how they retrieved it?
As you said, that they used that to arrest him. It was a tool that they then used to further investigate him. And we know the evidence about everything else. If it comes out that that was used as the sole way to arrest him, or the sole rationale to arrest him, could that be a legal issue? Is that the concern, one of the concerns from the defense, that this was the end all be all, that it wasn't just a tool, that it was used more than the prosecution is claiming right now? Let's first start there, if that's going to be an issue for Bryan Kohberger to exploit.
Okay. It's certainly an issue for the defense to look at. I'm not sure there's much law that supports it.
Okay.
Again, let me give you an analogy. Suppose somebody just called the police and said, yo, there's a father in Pennsylvania, check their DNA.
So how, again, he's going to how they retrieved, how they got this DNA, and whether that was so important, how they retrieved it, how they arrived at the DNA. Isn't the results of the DNA the most important? Again, and the defense will try to poke holes in this, that this was
and they check their DNA. However they got to dad, that's not something.
This picture here, I just, as an aside, very clear. Look at Bryan Kohberger's wrist. I had referred to this very specific picture on numerous occasions. Can everyone see the large cut on his right wrist, further toward his pants? But can you see that large cut? Because we always insisted that he must have cut himself during this attack. And right there is a large laceration on his wrist. On his wrist. That is clearly visible there. And many people, insisted, oh no, I never saw that. This is the clearest picture of that and gives a great illustration of it.
Ryan can complain about because his personal rights were not violated. Mm-hmm. So that unless there's a state law that says anyone who's affected by a familial DNA search has what we call standing, the right to say, hey, I can object to this. I'm not sure where it goes. Is there an argument I haven't been made familiar with? Possibly. I can tell you that having researched this in the last 24 hours to refresh my memory on familial DNA after I got your kind invitation, there are, as I said, only a couple of states that limit it by law.
Well, first of all, you're not combing through the Bryan Kohberger documents on a regular basis without me even saying anything. First, big surprise there. But more importantly than that, just the way that I understand it, the FBI constructed this family tree through IGG, through investigative genetic genealogy. And then the FBI then sent that tip to local law enforcement about Bryan Kohberger. That's when they got
So the FBI,
trash. And the defense wants to know specific details about how law enforcement used IGG to identify Kohberger as the suspect, which we just talked about. But it seems they may also want to know about testing that was done on other male DNA found at the scene. So now we're talking about potential other suspects that may have been overlooked by law enforcement. The fact that now the judge has handed over this material to the defense.
you know, that's, as you recall, there was about 3 or 4 other unidentified DNA samples at that house. One was apparently on a glove that was recovered outside by actually a podcaster who pointed it out. And what they would have to do like that is something called elimination DNA. Find out whose DNA it is and eliminate that person. They do that frequently with fingerprints. They eliminate fingerprints. For example, if there's a burglary at a house and you're trying to identify the perpetrator's fingerprints, what you might have to do is do elimination fingerprints on the occupants of that house who have permission and authority to be in that house. So eliminate their fingerprints from there so you'll be able to come up with the actual criminal fingerprints. The same thing may be true for these DNA samples. A lot of work, a lot of expense to do that. But if they do not do that, then during the trial, can't the defense say, did you test these other DNA samples? Well, then how do you know that they're not the perpetrator and that it's not Bryan Kohberger? There's 2 or 3 other samples if you never tested them. And did you do an investigation on that DNA? So all of that is extremely important.
Whether it's a win or not, it's definitely beneficial for them because now they have the materials to go through. It's a small win for them, I guess, in that sense. But the idea of now maybe using it to point the finger at somebody else, should we expect that?
There are 2 things you can do with evidence like that. If there's some other person's DNA at the scene, A, to the extent the police did not follow up, you have an argument of a flawed or incomplete investigation. And there's actually a U.S. Supreme Court case that says there's a right for the defense to say, wait a minute, you didn't check.
Right, you didn't check this other DNA.
Needless to say, if we can identify the source, say it's Jules Epstein, and it turns out Jules Epstein has a pattern of break-ins or something, it could lead the defense to say, we have an alternative suspect. So it's alternative suspect and or inadequate investigation based on what you're telling me.
And to be clear, also, the reason we're speculating a little bit about what the defense has or what they're going to do with it is because in the order from the judge, it says, quote, the specific material to be provided is set forth in
a sealed order to protect the privacy of the
sealed
investigative
order
genealogy
protect the
information.
privacy of the IGG information, including individuals on the family tree. Walk me through what the concern is there. Is it giving away the methodologies of law enforcement? Is it also protecting who on the family tree? Walk us through why there's privacy here.
Well, maybe it's just that in that family tree, there's cousin Jesse and cousin Jules who don't want to be known as the relatives of Bryan. So the
Fair.
judge is saying, okay, I got that. I'm going to give you the information, but I'm either going to white out the names of Jesse and Jules, or I'm telling you, defense lawyers, you can't disclose that further because Jesse and Jules have their own privacy interests, and I'm trying to balance Bryan's needs to create or not create, to present a defense, and third-party privacy. That's what I took that to mean.
And to be clear also about why there's so much talk about the DNA, because I've made this argument before. I think it is such a strong piece of evidence that some would say the linchpin of the whole case. Some have said the smoking gun of the case. Just to put a bow on this, the analysis on that knife sheath, it shows how unique the protein sequences are. So the National Institute of Justice has said, quote, a collection of these can give nearly irrefutable evidence statistically of a person's identity because
In the Gilgo Beach case, the DNA had a probability of over 40 zeros that it was Rex Heuermann. Or in the cases, and we're talking about the Gilgo case now, just to do a comparison of the DNA, they found hairs on the bodies in the Gilgo case belonging to Rex Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, and of his daughter. And District Attorney Ray Tierney, and again, I'm talking about the Gilgo case now, but I'm comparing it to this Bryan Kohberger case. Statistically, it eliminated really all the population except for that person. He said the number had so many zeros that the name of the number doesn't exist. So they don't even have a name for the number because of the amount of zeros.
is the likelihood of two unrelated people having the same number of repeated sequences in these regions becomes increasingly small as more regions are analyzed. And in the prosecution's filing in this case, they say, quote, the STR profile is at least 5.37 octillion times more likely to be seen if the defendant is the source than if an unrelated individual randomly selected from the general population is the source. And I have said this before, but I always looked at the Jerry Burns case in Iowa, which we covered here on Law and Crime. This is a guy who was convicted of murdering Michelle Martinko back in the 1970s, a cold case for decades. There was no eyewitnesses. There was no surveillance. There was no text messages. There was no GPS data. They took crime scene DNA, blood, compared it to data from a genealogical database that got a pool of people, including Burns. They then collected a straw he discarded at a restaurant, and the DNA on the straw was consistent with the blood on Martinko's dress. They were able to match his DNA. Now, this is a little bit different, right? I mean, I've interviewed other experts about this before, and they said, well, the DNA that's on the knife sheath may not be as strong as, for example, the Martinko case, because you might not be dealing with something like blood. Walk me through, if we can, Jules,
This
the
is
strength
interesting
of this
because everyone
DNA
tries to
on the
refute
knife
the
sheath,
DNA
and how
on the knife
big
sheath.
of a role it's going to play, and how much the defense can actually question its accuracy.
There are a couple of possibilities. One is they say they're wrong. Number two is they say it's somehow contaminated. Number three, innocent touch evidence. I go to a store, I pick up this knife sheath. Oh, this is interesting. No, I'm not going to buy it. Okay. I'm not suggesting the strength of any of those arguments, but the flip side is, of all the knife sheaths that happen to be found at the crime scene, is one that you just happen to touch at a knife store, where we also know you're driving around that night, and so on and so forth. It seems to me to be a tremendously powerful piece of circumstantial evidence, assuming the DNA analysis was done well.
I mean, I've said it. The idea here that out of all places, not only that, out of all the knife sheaths, forget about the DNA not on the doorknob, the DNA not on the carpet, the DNA not, those could be explained away, right? I'm not saying his DNA is there, but it's not like we're talking about his DNA on all these places in the house, because it was a party house. People went there. Out of all places, it's on the knife sheath, what seems to be the housing for the potential murder weapon, even though it hasn't been recovered. It just is such a powerful piece of evidence, and I can understand why the defense wants to question in any which way. So we'll see. We'll see where this goes. I think the defense has been quite creative in their defenses, and so I'm going to be eager to see what comes from it. But Jules Epstein.
So That was the what the defense had requested for a while ago, that they wanted um, the DNA information that was collected by the FBI, and they wanted it presented to the court so that they could, at some point poke holes in it. And that's their right as defense attorneys to do that. But the judge ruled in their favor this week. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, then you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed to us, go on our YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and of course, ring that bell and share us with your friends, your family, and talk about us around your dinner table. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 3 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with, count them, 5 different levels. And we're doing a lot of hard work on this. And we're trying to stay up on all the latest cases and all the cases that you guys are guys and gals, mostly gals, I don't know if you guys know, but the true crime community, at least this channel, is like 70% women. Isn't that amazing? Am I so lucky to be able to talk to 70% women? It's pretty incredible, right? But that's the nature of true crime. True crime, real crime. Women as a gender love true crime. And so we try to target some of our stories towards them because they really appreciate, women really appreciate true crime, real crime. And this case, of course, is just a case that comes around probably, a case like this every 25 or 50 years, just sort of an incredible case.
Inside the crime scene tape, Kaylee and her friends Madison Mogan, Santa Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were stabbed to death at the University of Idaho. And that car was part of the reason Kaylee was in town that weekend of the murders.
When she bought her car, she it wasn't her birthday, but it was a gift that she gave herself because she just got a new job. So I remember her being super excited for that and, showing Maddie and driving down there and showing her friends off with it.
Those friends, Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, Dylan Mortensen, and Bethany Funk, all lived together in the house on King Road, along with Kaylee's dog, Murphy.
Murphy, you've been a bad boy.
There's a video of all 5 of the girls together in the home posted just 2 weeks before the murders. They're laughing, making fun of each other, imitating each other.
Did anyone do their chores today? I'm just gonna do it. You didn't get out of here. You seriously gotta get out of here.
If you look back at their moment, you can actually see their whole lives. These girls really did do the social media stuff.
Get down. Get down.
And these girls, they were everywhere. So people got a taste and a look and a feel of who they really were. I think people connected with that. And then if you go back, you can see, I hate to say it, but the last hours of their lives.
Those last hours included 2 photos posted by Kaylee. On one of them, she wrote, "One lucky girl to be surrounded by these people." According to investigators, that last night, Ethan and Xana go to a party at the Sigma Chi house. They're there till about 1:45 a.m. that morning. Maddie and Kaylee go downtown Moscow, to a bar called the Corner Club. And then about 1:30 a.m., they walk to a food truck to grab a bite to eat.
And then what was the next? Don't forget to remove the
Carbonara.
I just wanted to give a little bit of a flavor of some of the things that we saw in the case a long time ago. It seems so long ago, right? And actually it wasn't that long ago, but it seems so long ago. And that to refresh our memory of what was it about? What was, remember all the craziness and the lunacy? And remember when it took 6 weeks to solve this case, to have someone arrested, and the news media was pushing that it was a cold case, and that should they give the case to the FBI, should they force the Moscow police and the Idaho State police to step aside and let the FBI take over. And then 6 weeks later, there was an arrest. And I worked in homicide, Manhattan North Homicide, one of the best homicide units in the world, probably. In the country, absolutely. I would say probably in the world. And 6 weeks to solve a murder like this is not a long time. However, the press would have you believe that, oh my God, it's a cold case. It's been 6 weeks. And then it draws another interesting thing, that the perpetrator arrested is a PhD student at Washington State University. And we all want a motive. We all want to hear what the hell was the motive. But guess what? We never got a motive. We still don't have a motive to this case. And as we tell you all the time, and anyone involved in the criminal justice, motive is not a necessary element of the crime to prove. You do not have to prove motive. But having said that, we still want to know what the motive is, don't we? We all want to know why. Why? Why did 4 young, amazing people lose their lives? Why? And we sort of need that. We sort of need to know the why. You know, we always talk about the who, the what, the where, the how, and the why and the when, right? Because that's, anyone that's ever been a cop knows that the first paragraph of every police report, you have to answer the questions when, where, who, what, how, and why. All in the first paragraph of the report. And if you don't, you're not a good police report taker or writer. You want to answer all those questions. And if you don't, you're not going to be around too long. The chief's going to say, who the hell wrote this report? Is that Cannon again? No, I made sure I answered all those questions in my report. So we do want to know, in this case, as I said, everyone, of course, wants to know the motive. Who would kill these 4 beautiful kids? Most of them 20 and 21 years old. I think at least 2 of them were 20 and maybe 2 of them were 21. That's so young, especially all of us, you guys watching, you have kids. My sons are 29 and 31, and I still call them my kids. I think we all do, right? Your kids will always be your kids. And then Ethan Chapin there, you know, one of a triplet. And every time we see pictures of these kids, and they raise different issues, cameras in the courtroom. Can they get a jury from Idaho that can be fair in this case? Will they be able to do that?
But if you live in Idaho, say near Moscow, in the county of Latah, you might want to make some alternate plans for 2024 summer. And you might want to think about getting a babysitter for the entire summer, because that's when the prosecutors in Bryan Kohberger's death penalty murder case are hoping to try him on 4 counts of first-degree murder. We don't have the official dates yet. They're not set in stone, but they could be as early as next week. That's when the hearings plan to start talking dates. And if they choose summer, my humble opinion, they are in for a world of hurt when it comes to jury selection.
Why are they in for a world of hurt when they pick the jury? I don't know if that's absolutely true.
Jurors to sit on the panel. I get it. I am not.
It might be difficult to get jurors on this.
Not a dummy when it comes to this stuff. Summer works well for the court. Summer works real well for the town of Moscow, and it really works for the University of Idaho, because the university's out and all the schools are out. So fewer people are around. There's plenty of parking. It's not disruptive to the community. But let's think it through a little further. What do families do when schools are out, especially in the summer? They travel, they take vacation, they look after their kids. They don't spend 6 weeks, I say more, locked in a courtroom with the summer heat, looking at autopsy photos of 4 beautiful children who were massacred, and then decide if the man charged should die for it. Don't even get me started that this is a capital case, death penalty, because it takes a very special person who can even sit in a death jury box. They're called death qualified. It's like simple. They're called death qualified jurors. And it is really hard to find death qualified jurors at the best of times, let alone summer. And while we're on the subject of finding Bryan Kohberger's jury, how about this? I don't need to tell you, because I'm talking about it right now. It is a high-profile case. Everybody knows something about this case. It's like Casey Anthony and Jodi Arias and OJ. So finding a juror who can put everything they know about the murders, about the kids, about Bryan Kohberger, who can put that all aside and say, yes, I can be fair, and I can also vote for death. Well, now you're getting close to the unicorn juror. Now let's add another layer, shall we? Just for kicks. What if
I think she's making this a little more complicated than it is. In something called voir dire is where attorneys and the prosecution get to question jurors. And one of the questions would be, would it be undue hardship for you to sit on a 6 to 8 week, or let's even say a 12-week jury? Let's cover it that way. Would there be undue hardship? Would you lose your home because you didn't go to work? Would you lose your job? And if you answer yes, I would think that the prosecution and perhaps the defense would excuse you. So I think that Banfield's getting a little bit too dramatic here. The other thing, when she talks about death qualified, that is absolutely true. That this jury, because it is a death penalty case, must be death penalty qualified. And what does that mean? That means you have to be okay with the death penalty. And if you're not, you will not be chosen for this jury. In essence, you have to be pro-death penalty. And again, if you're not pro-death penalty, you're not going to be chosen for a death penalty case. And then, of course, Banfield talks about holding the trial during the summer. And yeah, you're right. The University of Idaho, it's not closed. A college never closes. There's always classes during the summer. Not as busy, though. It won't be as busy in the summer as it is during the spring and the fall. And how about the town of Moscow, Idaho? What's that like during the summertime? And usually the period and the time when people go on vacation, are they going to have a hard time finding jurors because of that? I don't think so. I think Banfield's getting a little dramatic.
they decide to sequester this jury? You know what that means, right? It means you go from the courtroom to the hotel, and you don't get to see your family typically.
You don't get to see your family, so you have to be sequestered because to be fair, to be a fair juror, so that you don't get to talk about the case or with your family, with your friends. You don't get to hear the media reports on it, which is what she's doing right now. So yes, that could happen.
Weeks, I say more. Goodbye summer 2024 for Latah County citizens, 12 of them, probably 16. This is a county of 40,000 people, folks, and many of them are university students. You know, the students that don't vote there, they don't pay taxes there, so they are not on the rolls for jury service there. So you can squash the 40,000 down to a lot fewer candidates. My God, how are you going to find candidates in a teeny tiny jury pool like that? Susan Constantine knows these problems well because she's a jury consultant. She's a trial strategy expert. She's a human behavior expert. She has consulted on some of the highest profile cases of our time, including Jeffrey Epstein And Michael Jackson, need I say more? So you are perfect for this conversation. This all kind of came to me in like a fever dream. How on earth do they think they could possibly find summer vacation juries or a summer vacation jury, if they decide to do 6 to 8 weeks in July and August?
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult, Ashley, as you know, because we already got 40,000 is already whittled down to a very small number of people. And then on top of that, look at how many people are going to be on vacation, as you already stated. A lot of them are going to be going away on vacation with their family. You don't want to create any sort of hostile jurors that are forced to have to serve on this jury when they're not wanting to. So we can whittle away a whole lot of those people. And then, as you know, that in jury selection is not jury selection, it's deselection. So that process in itself is very tedious because on both sides, they have a specific profile of a juror they're looking for. They've done their pretrial intelligence. They have a really strong idea of what they want, what they don't want. And then we're trying to pull those out of that very small pool of people. I think it's going to be a very, very taxing and very difficult to do.
Thank you for watching.
So that's the jury consultant. But again, both sides gets to disqualify certain people from the jury that they feel the prosecution can disqualify folks that they feel will not be pro-prosecution. The defense gets to disqualify, and not just, they can't disqualify every single person. And there has to be a reason why someone gets disqualified. They can't just say, oh, I don't like the way that person looks. I don't want them on this jury. So what are some of when we talk about this case though, PhD in nutrition, I'm confused. Being death qualified, being biased to some extent. PhD in nutrition, what death qualified means that you must be able to find the person guilty when you understand that it is a death penalty case, and the person could potentially receive the death penalty. And if you are morally opposed to the death penalty, then you will not be chosen as a juror on a death penalty case. If you believe that that's bias, you're being asked ahead of time whether or not you could serve and what your views are on the death penalty. So if you said, I'm against the death penalty, I could never find someone guilty in a death penalty case because I'm morally opposed, then you wouldn't be chosen for this jury. Is that bias? I don't think it is. I mean, you're being asked ahead of time. So no, I don't think it's bias. So again, I always like to speak about this case is about Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, and Ethan Chapin. And we always need to bring that back, Steve Gonsalves and his daughter Kaylee on the screen, and Christy and Steve Gonsalves on the screen now, and just they become sort of the face of this case, When they talk about the knife sheath and, of course, the DNA, and that to me is a very strong piece of evidence. And I think to everyone it should be. Like, how was a knife sheath that contained the murder weapon in this case, how was it left on the bed underneath the body of Madison Mogan? And then for someone to say that that's not a powerful piece of evidence. How could anyone even say that? That would be incredible, right? And is there a way to attack the DNA on this? Yeah, and you heard that defense attorney say, yeah. Oh, in this case, Bryan Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath. Oh, he could have touched it at another location and someone else could have left it there. But that's sort of far-fetched, right? But can a defense attorney bring that up and create doubt with that kind of statement? Yeah, absolutely. But would you believe that? I don't think I could really believe that. So The DNA on the knife sheath is probably the most powerful piece of evidence in this case. But is it the only evidence? Is it the only evidence? No. No, it's not. How about the digital evidence and the video evidence they have of someone driving that white Hyundai Elantra back and forth, near the house? Remember that that 3D reenactment we played? Someone presented that. Someone actually did that, and News Nation played it. I'm going to play a little bit of that now.
Here's his plan, and he now has to rethink things. He continues on to the back where he sees even more lights on. From the affidavit, we know he drove by the house 3 times in less than 5 minutes, probably trying to figure out what to do next. He finally decides to leave the area for a little while and observes the lights are on one last time in front as he drives off. Cameras show him leaving the neighborhood and exiting on Walenta Drive in this direction. It's uncertain which way he went from this point here, but we know that he is seen here at this location at 3:45 a.m., caught on a gas station security camera. Wondering if this could truly be a 2015 Elantra, I downloaded a known image of one with a similar angle of view. I then entered that into a 3D modeling software and added some lighting and then tilted the camera to get a similar angle. I then animated the image to be traveling at 40 miles per hour, giving motion blur, which ended with this result. Though not scientific, we can see very close similarities that this is a 2015 Elantra. Back to the map. We see the suspect re-enters the neighborhood at 4:04 a.m. He drives up to the house and slows down. Looking at the windows, he sees the lights are now off. Continuing to the back, he checks to see if those lights are off. They are. He's excited. He knows everyone is finally in bed, but he wants to check the front one last time. As he drives down, he's filled with adrenaline, seeing the lights are all off. His brain short circuits for a second as he clumsily tries to turn around in front of the house. It fails, but he regains composure and drives on. He's caught on camera making a 3-point turn at the end of the street to return back to the residence. He does his final drive to the back of the house. In the beginning, most of us believed the 2 surviving roommates, Bethany and Dylan, were sleeping on the first floor. Since then, we've learned Dylan was sleeping here on the 2nd floor, along with Xana and Ethan located here. Kaylee and Madison were located here on the 3rd floor. The dog was located on the 3rd floor and the room by itself. Let's move around and see through the walls into the kitchen, to the back slider, and take a look at the
I think this is an outstanding reenactment, even the amateurishness of it is great because it sort of lets the viewer really like see inside the house and connect the dots when people say, oh, the only evidence they have is a knife sheath. And then when you watch some of this stuff, you say, oh, and look, they can't put Kohberger in that car. You can't say that the person driving that car is Kohberger or that car belongs to Kohberger, but there is circumstantial evidence that is connected in this case that shows, yes, that probably was him, and that, yes, that is his car.
time frames. At 4:04 a.m., the suspect can be seen trying to park his car. At 4:09, approximately 5 minutes later, he enters the house through the back slider. At 4:18, he leaves the house after committing the crimes. At 4:20, he's caught on camera driving away at a high rate of speed. All of this only took 9 minutes. Let's watch what that looks like. The suspect enters through the back sliding door. He pauses at the stairs to look around to make sure no one's up. He then turns and goes upstairs. The first bedroom he stops at and opens the door, he sees no one there. He continues to the next bedroom. Here we know what happens. Downstairs, Dylan is sleeping. The noise from upstairs wakes her up. She thinks it's Kaylee playing with her dog. She gets up and goes to the door and looks out. She sees nothing there. The suspect then continues down the stairs about 3 minutes later. He then heads to Xana's room. Outside, there's a security camera picking up some whimpering, cries, and a thud at 4:17. We've learned that Xana was found on the floor, which might explain the thud. Dylan again hears something and looks outside her door. She sees the suspect. He walks right past her and leaves.
I want to bring.
So pretty amazing. I think that is a pretty amazing rendition. And one of the things that is incredible to me is that with that rendition of what occurred, the fact that at 9 o'clock in the morning, he comes back to the location to see the police response. That is like incredible. And they can prove that through the GPS on his phone, which he had now turned back on. Remember the evidence that he had turned his phone off? And then he comes back to the house at 9 o'clock in the morning. And to watch, it's almost like someone who is an arsonist sets fires and then goes back to the scene of the fire to see the handiwork that they did. Very, very similar in this case, right? He does a quadruple murder in less than 9 minutes. 9 minutes. So he does a quadruple murder. And then he comes back to the location to view the carnage that he participated in of these beautiful kids here. He goes back to the location, and not an uncommon thing, not uncommon at all that he did this, and not uncommon in regards when we talk about serial killers. Even though we know if Bryan Kohberger is in fact guilty, he's not a serial killer as far as we know, but he is a mass killer. He killed 4 people at one time. That's a mass killer, right? And then remember the arguments just recently when they knocked down 1122 King Road, which incidentally I was totally against. I was totally against them doing that because I felt that that was such an invaluable piece of evidence. There's a picture of it right there. Them knocking down 1122 King Road, the scene of the crime. Horrible. I mean, when I watched that, and when I watched it somewhat live when it first occurred, it really was chilling, I think, that this piece of bad history was being destroyed. And in no way could a jury ever walk inside it and view the crime scene to feel what it was like and to get a true perspective without pictures or digital evidence of what it looked like in that location. And as the shovel hits that house, ooh, it's really a horrible thing, you know, that to see it knocked down. And the university and the community wanted that house knocked down so badly. They wanted it knocked down so badly. And that's what they did, you know. Debbie Gibby, how were they allowed to do this? Well, no one fought them. No one, actually filed a court petition to stop them from doing it. And I think that the prosecutor was okay with it. The defense was absolutely okay with it. The community wanted the house down. The only people that objected to it were the families of the victims, and specifically the Gonzalezes. They were against it. You know, they were two people, that's Steve and Christy Gonzalez. They fought, but they never filed legal papers to stop it from happening. So then, how much did they actually? Just even hearing the sound of it, it's just something that horrible, you know. When you see the house being knocked down like that, a piece of evidence that had the jury wanted to, under the direction of the court, of the district attorney, accompanied by the defense also, could have went through the crime scene, witnessed the crime scene, taken a look at the crime scene, and felt and saw what it was like to be inside that crime scene. That's all I think we would ask for, you know? And and it's never to be, though, you know. It's never to be, because as we could see in this, it's like Debbie Gibby, it's like the open 3D view. You're right. It says as the house comes down, the house is coming down. It's just sad, very sad. I think it was sad. And again, I was against it, and that they still did it, right? So some of the other evidence, the white Hyundai, of course, that they have, and of course that was his car, the white Hyundai. Can they put him inside that car? Well, I think forensically they can, right? The computer that's inside the car. We could talk about that. Every channel has done shows about the forensic evidence involved in this case. Layla K. didn't law enforcement match his phone to the car movements that night, to the same car the next day, and see BK getting out of it at Albertsons. That's how they knew it was his car. Layla K, 100%. They matched the car to him. His phone, phone calls, the pinging of the phone and cell sites. Yeah, when I say connect the dots, and I mean that. And I don't mean that just to be obnoxious. An investigation is a series of connecting the dots. And the dots will tell you a lot about a case. And as you can connect them, put them together, and see where it leads. And when you tell the story, when a prosecutor presents a case to the grand jury and to it when there's a trial, it's how good the prosecutor tells the story and presents the evidence that will result in a conviction or possibly an acquittal. And in the same way that a defense attorney will try to poke holes in the prosecutor's case and their story, will determine whether or not they have a good enough case or not to get a conviction, to get a conviction. So, as we mentioned earlier on, the case against Bryan Kohberger, what's changed? Well, really, not that much has changed. It's just different motions that they're putting together. The defense trying to challenge the DNA. One of the biggest things that I said early on, and on the screen there is Dylan Mortensen. And she is the one roommate that witnessed the killer going down the stairs and watched him, saw him as he walked by. However, he was wearing a mask. And I had said numerous times, can Dylan Mortensen, when this case goes to trial, can she sit inside the courtroom and look at Bryan Kohberger sitting next to his attorneys at the defense attorney. And can she say, that's the guy I saw the morning of November 13th inside 1122 King Road? That's him. Imagine the defense. How do you know? How can you say it's him? He had a mask on. Or the person you described had a mask on. And if she says, well, I can tell by the way he moves, the way he looks, the bushy eyebrows, his body type, his whole persona, that's the same guy I saw. If she can say that, and I'm not saying she can, maybe she can't say that, but if she could say that, is that extremely, extremely powerful evidence? You bet. You bet. Steve Holland, the only thing worse than what happened to these poor kids would be if the wrong person is convicted. Let's get all the facts and then make a decision. Steve, I 100% agree with you, but we can't make the decision. We're watching. The only people that can make this decision is the jury. And let's hope that Bryan Kohberger is the right guy and that the prosecution presents a strong case against him. You're right. I don't want to see anyone innocent get convicted. Debbie Gibby, Steve Holland, the knife covering sheath, however you spelled that, was under one of the victims. They tracked him to and from the house like 8 times. Ann Waters, do what they did in the OJ trial. Put a mask on his face and ask her if she looks like the person she saw. Sarah Keach, all of their neighbors have said they lived in a party drug house. You know, Sarah, I presume you went to college, right? I went to college, right? There was lots of party houses in college, weren't there? Kids would sleep out, sleep at other people's houses. People would party everywhere, right? There's sort of different rules of living when you go to college as compared to when you're living in what we'd say the real world, right? I know that when my sons went to college, and my oldest son, he rented a house, and I was horrified when I went to see the house. I was like, you're going to live in this house? And I actually confronted the landlord. I go, you have the nerve to charge them this amount of money for this dump? There were so many things wrong with the house. And then I went there, and the landlord fixed a lot of the things, but the house was a dump. Was 1122 King Road any different than thousands of other college houses across the country? No, I don't think so. You know, I think that's what we're sort of used to in this country, right? Barbara Ann, we suspect the glove they found at BK's parents' home in PA with the ID cards in the box. We suspect the IDs will connect BK to the Idaho house. You know, Barbara Ann, we don't know all of the evidence that the prosecution has, nor do we know all of the evidence that they turned over to the defense in discovery. We have no idea. So there could be tons more evidence that we have no idea about. That's for sure, you know. So all we can do is wait and see what they have. Folks, if you're looking for a great defense attorney in the New York metropolitan area, then Joe Murray is your man. Joe's a retired NYPD police officer and a fantastic defense attorney. You can reach Joe on his cell phone at 718-514-3855. Email him at joe@jmurray-law.com. Go on his website, jmurray-law.com. Not only is Joe a fantastic defense attorney, but a huge supporter of the Police Off the Cuff podcast. And we really appreciate Joe and everything he's done for me and for this channel. So, you know, so folks, that's sort of what I wanted to cover tonight. Steve Holland, most people here seem to have this guy convicted prior to hearing the evidence. That's sad when it's innocent to proven guilty. Steve, we're not convicting anyone. We're just talking about the evidence and what they have. And not a single person here is going to sit on this jury. So, yes, a person is innocent till proven guilty. But I don't see any harm in talking about a case and talking about the evidence that they have and if it's powerful or not. And that's all we're doing here. Tina King, yes, this isn't a slum house. Most houses off campus are drug houses. Please. Well, I'm not saying they're drug. I'm saying they're party houses. Everyone that goes to college, has been in houses like this, maybe lived in houses like this, right? So, Halsey 0815, I drank a lot as a young man. I could see myself rolling back over and falling to sleep even if the place was burning down around me. Cammy too. Hello, how are you? Good to see you, Cammy. Hunter Zagler, if I had $1 for every time Bill bitched about the cost of his son's car, I don't bitch about it. I'm glad I paid it so they don't have student loans. But Schmitty, good to see you. The house I lived in was eerily similar to this one, strangely built. Had stairs going up the back. We used to go out the bedroom windows and sit on the roof. That's college, right? Relevant. Many years prior to this, the family of the former or current, can't recall, university president owned that house. The uni president never lived there. Just an interesting coincidence. Yes, very interesting. Rose K. Moscow is not an innocent town. Everyone thinks it is. Is there any innocent town across this country? What does that mean, innocence? Debbie Gibby, Steve Holland, we can have our opinions, but he wouldn't be sitting in a jail all this time without some concrete proof. And we aren't the jury members. Yes, they have probable cause. And if the defense felt that he was wrongly accused, he would be out on bail right now, wouldn't he? Do you see him out on bail? No, I don't think so. Halsey 0815, bail up to OA judge, ain't going to let him out. If T's suspect he killed 4 people, he could possibly silence a witness. Well, right. If they didn't have a strong case, he would be out on bail right now. Trust me. So that's all part of this. And again, I usually mention innocent to proven guilty. It's just, this case is a strong case. This case elicits lots of emotion, right? Lots of emotion because of the fact that it's 4 kids like this. Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Knodel, Ethan Chapin. And you look at Steve Gonsalves with his daughter Christy in this picture. And the parents, Steve and Christy Gonsalves, with that, can they ever smile again? I don't know. And the beautiful Chapin family, right? With Ethan Chapin there, the tallest one among all of them, right? One of triplets, and on the screen, and his mom, the beautiful person that she is, Their family, I think, is amazing in a certain way. And I'm not saying I could be like them, but they have chosen to remove themselves away from this case, and they don't want to be near the trial. They don't want anything to do with it. And they've sort of tried to move on. And I admire them for that. I'm not saying I could do that. I don't think I could. But I admire their spirit, and I admire the way they're dealing with it. And sometimes it's maybe tougher not to give in to anger. And they've found some way to do that. And as I said, I don't know if I could do that. I think I more sort of be the angry person. I would be more angry, and I wouldn't be able to let go of my anger the way that the Chapin family has, which to me is, I guess if you talk about being a Christian and stuff, and I'm not saying they're forgiving, but I think they're trying to do what they're doing to heal themselves rather than to keep feeling this pain every single day of their life, you know. That's just my point. I don't know. Rita, God knows the public needs to keep talking, watching these heavy-handed government. Information is how we safely guide our family futures. Yes. Daniel K., innocent till proven guilty is a legal standard, doesn't apply to the general public. You know something, the reason people watch true crime and talk, because it's interesting, right? And we talk about the evidence, we talk about criminal procedure, we talk about technology, we talk about the police. And that's why people watch and take part in true crime. And none of us, as I said, are going to be on this jury. So it's interesting for us to talk about the case and talk about the evidence they have in this case, right? So, Sarah Keats, Dana mom and Maddie's stepmom are currently in prison for selling drugs. I think the case is a drug issue, more than one killer. No, I don't buy that. I don't buy that at all. Look, every case that we cover in real crime, true crime, someone has a conspiracy theory about the case, you know. And I think this case is pretty clear. I think they have the right guy, in my opinion, okay? And you can agree with me, disagree with me. That's the beauty of this country. And it's the beauty of true crime, real crime, you know. So that's about our show for this evening, guys. I want to just thank everyone. We came on a little bit late, 10 o'clock at night. The Late Show, Cannon's Late Show, right? True crime, real crime, and the Late Show. And I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. I see some new names. And again, if you're not subscribed, go on to YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Ring the bell. Share us with your friends, family. Hit that like button. And if you want to contribute, we have Patreon and we have a YouTube channel. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in tonight, especially at this sort of late hour that we tuned in. And just to update on this case, this is a tremendously interesting case. And we'll get back to it as things start to progress and move along. So, folks, have a wonderful rest of your night. And if you're in a super cold area, try to stay warm. Have a great night, and God bless from Police Off the Cuff.
One episode just ain't enough.